What's going on, everybody? Hope everyone is having a great night so far. I got a very special guest. He does some amazing stuff with his podcast, the JBoy Show, also known as SEC Total. He is your go-to guy for SEC football. He is also an Auburn Tiger fanatic. He's been doing this podcast for literally 8 months. He's already had guests such as Hugh Freeze on, Paul Feinbaum, the head coach for University of Tennessee basketball, Bruce Pearl. Tremendous job, JBoy. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your night to come on the scoop, man. I am extremely grateful to have you on the show.
Hey, excited to be here. Thanks for allowing me to come on and speak to your audience and talk a little ball, man. I appreciate the intro.
Oh, yeah, man. We'll talk some Auburn football. I kind of kid with people saying, like, Miami is slowly developing an Auburn football staff with Rhett Lashley, T-Rob, Travaris Robinson, and Travis Williams. I mean, we basically have 3 Auburn Tigers on our staff, so.
Yeah, well, no, Manny's done a great job hiring. All 3 of those guys are excellent, not only from an X's and O's standpoint, but from a recruiting standpoint and really, a realness. A lot about being a coach and recruiting is being yourself, not being fake. And those guys can not only tell you where to line up, they can go get the big dogs too.
No, absolutely. I completely agree, JBoy. And let's talk some Auburn football. I want to touch up on Gus Malzahn, towards the end of his career. Beginning, it started off great, competed for a national title. That was a fun team to watch with Nick Marshall. I think their co-OC was also Rhett Lashley. They had a lot of magic throughout that season. Let's just put it that way. Make it to the national title game. Now modern day, Gus Malzahn parts ways with Auburn. What's your overview about the Gus Malzahn legacy at Auburn?
When I look at the Malzahn legacy, really the thing that I look at, you talk about that first year, obviously, you come in, and again, I give him all the credit. He was the head coach. You had Nick Marshall, who was unbelievable in the pocket, obviously at quarterback. You didn't win it. And you set the bar really high, and that's great, and that's always nice, but you never got back there, and people say, oh, well, he beat Alabama a couple times, this, that, and the other, but you're 2-8 versus Georgia, you're 3-5 versus LSU, you really don't have a ring, you weren't able to be in the playoff, and when you're in the SEC West, and you're competing against Alabama and Texas A&M, and you look at the East with Georgia and all these teams, you better be able to put up or shut up at least a couple times. And I think it just ran its course with Gus Malzahn. He's a great man. His players loved him. He did things the right way. But just like anything in life, sometimes there's time for a needed change, and Auburn needed to make that change. And I think they made a good one.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about Coach Harsin coming down from Boise State? My outside perspective, Coach Harsin, he spent a long time at Boise State. Geographically, it's in Idaho. Very far from Alabama. I know he did coach at Arkansas State, but, those ties with high school coaches, you have Nick Saban, I know you're going to get mad if I say this, but, he's probably the greatest college football coach of all.
Look, we're all SEC, man. I coached college football for 9 years, 5 in D1. He's one of the greatest, if not the greatest, and the way he does it is a blueprint for a lot of guys to be able to try and set up to even have a third of the success that Nick Saban has had. So, we have Alabama guys on our show all the time and like to mix it up and got no problem giving credit where credit's due.
So what are your thoughts, JBoy, about the new hire down at Auburn?
Well, I think the Auburn fan base is behind Brian Harsin and the staff he's brought in because it's a little bit different than what Auburn's done in the past. It wasn't a good old boy network hire. It wasn't, well, this booster knows him and they're buddies and you can get access here. Brian Harsin's not that guy. It's kind of an out-of-the-box hire, and you bring up a great point. You say, well, how's a guy from out west that doesn't have a lot of ties in the South going to be able to recruit and do all that? Well, my answer is it don't matter what you look like, what you sound like, where you're from. If you can recruit, you can recruit. And you brought up the most important point. It's the relationships with high school coaches. It's the structure of knowing where to go, where Auburn has more success, or whatever team you get hired for have more success in certain areas of states, whether it's Georgia, Florida, Alabama. And you really got to look at the hires that Brian Harsin brought around him. You look at Mike Bobo, who's been in the SEC forever, knows every high school coach probably around, knows the important places. Derek Mason, a guy from out west, ended up being the head coach at Vanderbilt for 7 years. So obviously he has a great grasp of where everything is in the Southeast. So it's always a race for efficiency. And instead of Brian Harsin having to put the jigsaw puzzle together from scratch, bringing in guys like Derek Mason, bringing in guys like Mike Bobo allows you to be more efficient and know where to go as opposed to having to search and then find where to go.
Yeah, that's a tremendous staff. I mean, Derek Mason, great defensive coordinator. Mike Bobo, we were talking before we aired, Mark Richt's right-hand man offensively, coach quarterbacks such as Aaron Murray, Matthew Stafford, like you discussed with me before the show. I mean, he is a quarterback whisperer. He knows how to develop quarterbacks. He was the head coach at Colorado State. He knows the ins and outs of SEC football. Okay, he's an elite recruiter. So, hey, I think Coach Harsin, I think he's going to do a great job at Auburn. I'm very curious, how it'll pan out for him. But I think he has a great staff and he'll do fine. JBoy, Rhett Lashley was a part of Gus Malzahn's staff. Broyles Award finalist at SMU. How was he as a co-offensive coordinator? And how does Gus Malzahn just let him go away, to another program, just part ways with him?
Rhett did a really good job at Auburn. He's kind of from that Malzahn system. I think he's kind of used pace a little bit more, started to branch out since he's left Malzahn. And sometimes it's good just to get away. A lot of coaches that have proteges and guys like that, they understand when to say when and when a guy needs to go spread his wings on his own. And Rhett's obviously been great everywhere he's been. The thing I think that Rhett does a really good job of is he's super competitive, but he's always poised. Even you see him with D'Eriq King, you see him with the other offensive guys. Even if the player may not be out of control, but it's very emotional, Rhett does a great job of calming him down, keeping the mistakes at a minimum, keeping them in the game. And I think Rhett has a really good feel for play calling situationally, where you are in the game. He's a guy that wants to dictate the pace. And I think the passing game, he's really added some elements. He's not there yet. I wish he'd add a little more to the play action game, but I think he's done a great job with D'Eriq King playing to his players' strengths, which not enough coaches do.
Absolutely. No. Look, 34 points per game at Miami offensively. What we've had the past few years with Mark Richt as their OC, Dan Enos as their OC, we'll take it any day of the week. I know a lot of Miami fans were very excited about, the hire, and, we'll see what happens in year 2 with Rhett Lashley. We can get over the 34 points per game mark, and, he did a tremendous job at SMU. So I'm very interested how that will pan out. You think Rhett Lashley will ever get, you think his heart is back at Auburn, or that was just because, his coach in high school was Gus Malzahn?
Well, I mean, I think Auburn will always have a special place, in his heart. You kind of remember the first girl that kissed you. But I think Rhett, understands the game, and he wants to be a head coach, and he wants to try and see how far he can go. And he's positioned himself very well, and I think that's his next step. And, when I watch Rhett and you watch the evolution of a career, you look at his resume with some of the guys he's worked under, not only Gus Malzahn, but just from a structural standpoint, you're putting all those things away that when you get your chance to be a head coach, you're going to use those things. And I think Rhett has compiled a lot. I think he's very cerebral. I think he's a guy that would be good fundraising, a guy that would make sure the players are doing the right things on and off the field. I think Rhett's a rising star in the game. It's only a matter of time.
Love it. JBoy just stated, basically, when Auburn wins the national title in a couple years, they're going to go after Rhett Lashley.
Hey, look, to be honest with you, anybody attached to Gus Malzahn right now, I don't think that they want to be anywhere around Auburn. But we'll see how it goes in a couple years. You never know. It's all cyclical.
Love it. Hey, how do you think Rhett Lashley kind of developed quarterbacks during his time at Auburn, with Nick Marshall? How do you view him as an OC, with the quarterback position? Because that's very important for a lot of Miami Hurricanes fans, is developing the quarterback position, something we've been fairly missing for some time. And I think we found a college football playmaker with D'Eriq King.
Well, yeah, I think what separates Rhett is Rhett understands that. Yeah, well, I think what Rhett understands is that every quarterback's different. I think he's not going to try and fit a square peg in a round hole. And when you realize that doesn't mean you have to coach different or act different, but you kind of tailor the way you coach guys into a certain area, you know the strengths, you know the weaknesses, you know what he can do to defenses. Having a guy like De'Aaron King or a guy like Nick Marshall that's able to run the ball, you have to account for him, whether it's by a spy or kind of making sure you're in your pass rush lanes. You can't go past him. And he understands how to use that to open up other areas, regardless if it's De'Aaron King or maybe more of a pocket passer. So, like I said, his resume is filled with guys that did multiple things. I think Rhett really understands the position. He does a good job of recognizing coverages. And really where he stands out to me is when it comes down to box play, being able to have a guy that understands both of those. And like I said, the passing game for Rhett's only going to keep getting better and better. He's going to add stuff to the play action game, but he's not going to give a quarterback. I'll use De'Aaron King for an example here. He's not going to give him more than he needs. And I think that's something that in today's game where everybody wants to be flashy and do all the stuff, you just got to put your players in the best position for them to make plays, and I think Rhett understands that.
100%. No, I wholeheartedly agree, and I think you hit it, nail in the coffin, JBoy. Breaking down Rhett Lashley. Speaking of former Auburn coaches on this staff, I feel like Miami did a great job this offseason, hiring Travis Williams and former Auburn Tiger himself, Travaris Robinson, as well. I know those were two former Auburn Tigers. I'll talk about those guys, as players at Auburn, and then we'll get into, them as coaches.
Yeah, well, T. Will and T. Rob, two great players. They were great players at Auburn, won a lot of games, did it the right way. They're both great coaches. I think Manny Diaz knocked it out of the park. I was surprised that Auburn didn't retain T. Will. It's Brian Harson's show. He can do it how he wants. But you look, you lose KJ Britt, who just balled out at the Senior Bowl, and all he did was put a guy that was out of position in Zacoby McClain, and he graded out the highest to any middle linebacker, according to Pro Football Focus. And what Travis brings is everybody will talk about his recruiting and all this stuff and this, that, and the other. But he also understands the game. He played the position. He knows what the box is supposed to look like, and the guys love him. And he knows how to win a room. And that's, to me, what separates a Travis Williams and a Travaris Robinson and guys like that. They can go in their room. The guys will respect them. They'll listen to them. They'll take the coaching like they're supposed to. And at the end of the day, what else can you really ask?
Right, exactly. And how did he develop his linebackers down at Auburn? And did he have a lot of, kind of voice his opinion? I know he was co-defensive coordinator as well, but, was he in charge of any game plan, game plan for the games throughout the week? Or, was he really just kind of stepping back? It was just Coach Steele.
Well, Coach Steele's a guy that's very well respected, been in the game for a long time. And T-Will obviously had a big part, in the game plan, especially against the run game. But, T-Will's a guy, I talked about Rhett leaving Auburn, that if Travis gets some experience away from Auburn, I think there's a good chance he may end up coming back as the DC one day. He's very cerebral. He's a guy that wants to coach the whole defense. He wants to be a coordinator. He feels like he's ready. But just from a development standpoint, you look at the guys he coached, KJ Britt, like I mentioned, that really helped himself in the Senior Bowl, Zacoby McClain, Owen Papo, and you keep going back, and he really was about to start putting guys into the league, which is a huge help in recruiting, obviously, when you're going into living rooms and trying to tell kids how you're going to get them paid and turn them into pros. But he knows the X's and O's. He understands how the three levels of the defense works, and he's going to be a huge, help to the game planning. Manny's obviously a defensive guy, knows his stuff, but having that experience in there, a young, fresh guy, has a new perspective on stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if he has a big hand in the game plan.
JBoy, you stated on one of your podcasts, T-Rob and T-Will together combined are the ultimate 1-2 punch on the recruiting trail. Did Miami just land two elite recruiters this offseason?
Oh, without a doubt they did. I mean, those, you separate those guys from each other and they're already elite recruiters. Well, now you put it together and let them tag team, and go try and finish on 5 stars to add to the class and this, that, and the other. You have a tandem that will be able to close as good as anyone in the ACC. And if you want to run at Clemson, not saying that Miami's going to turn into Clemson, but you got two guys that aren't afraid to go toe-to-toe with them in recruiting. They're not afraid of that Clemson Tiger paw on their chest, They've been in the SEC. They know what it's like recruiting against Alabama and Georgia and all that stuff, and they'll go right in there, and they're not going to be afraid. Because I'll tell you this about T-Will and T-Rob. The last thing they are is scared. Their players will play like they're not scared, and they play awfully physical. But from a recruiting standpoint, I don't know of two better guys that I'd want sitting in a living room outside of Nick Saban and a couple guys to go finish on recruits we have to go win a championship.
I love it, JBoy. Like, that was the greatest thing I probably have heard in quite a long time. I like Miami recruiting is like, we always, every coaching staff has like finished in the top 10 once, in their time coaching tenure at Miami, because you're just in my opinion, the best region, of recruiting. Auburn, they just had a former wide receiver, Anthony Schwartz. He's going to go in the NFL draft. He's from South Florida. They've done a great job in recruiting in South Florida as well. They're in there. I think, was it Ricardo Lewis? I could be wrong with the name.
Yeah.
I believe he's from South Florida as well.
Yeah, Ricardo caught the tip pass against Georgia, the prayer Jordan Harris.
Yeah. Aaron Murray's face was hilarious in that play. But, like we Blake Baker, for example, he was our DC. He goes to LSU as the linebackers coach, and everybody was just excited. Giving up 700 or 800 total yards to UNC, that's just atrocious. So, to hear you say that recruiting is going to be, up an extra level at Miami, and we got some elite recruiters coming from the SEC. Miami fans are very excited. What are your thoughts about Travaris Robinson as a position coach? I know you cover a lot of SEC football, and he spent a lot of time as co-DC at South Carolina. What was kind of what was South Carolina's defensive backs groups? What was their characteristics under T-Rob during his time?
Yeah, well, go look at J.C. Horn. That'll tell you all you need to know. And again, this all goes back to recruiting. It's recruiting and development. The reason Alabama dominates, they have the best players and they develop them the best. So the only way you're going to be able to compete with Clemson and teams like this, you got to be able to recruit the most high caliber players. And that's great. But being able to develop them as well. And really with T-Rob being able to kind of hone in on a position, when you're a coordinator, you're having to juggle all this stuff. You're looking at 3,500 different things. I've done it myself. I understand. But when you're able to be a position coach, you can really kind of go back and get in your bag, I guess, as the kids would say. They're going to be physical. They're going to know how to press. They're going to be in position. You're going to get a nice mix of man and zone. Now, look, T-Rob's not perfect. T-Will's not perfect. Nobody's perfect. But the guys will be coached up. They'll be where they're supposed to be. And I'll think you'll see guys trust themselves more in the back end than Miami has, and being able to get out of breaks and stuff a little bit better. Because to play DB as a DB coach and a guy that understands it pretty well, you got to win early to win late. And T-Rob understands that, and he'll have those guys ready.
Love it, man. Hey, it sounds like great things are coming in Coral Gables. Hopefully we can see, the Miami Hurricanes football program, trend upward. Maybe we'll compete against Clemson. I don't know. We'll see what happens. We got to beat UNC first. JBoy, Bob Shoop. I know he was a defensive coordinator at Tennessee under James Franklin, went to Penn State, did a great job. Mississippi State, was a Broyles Award finalist. What are your thoughts about Bob Shoop coming in as an analyst role?
Oh, well, anytime you can get a guy like Bob Shoop, especially as an analyst, you're going to take that 10 out of 10 times. He's well-traveled. He's going to have great perspective. He's going to be able to give you answers. Maybe sometimes if anybody gets stuck, he's, been in enough places, whether it's Mississippi State, whether it's Michigan, wherever, to be able to go in the room and say, well, I've seen it done this way, and this way. And that may be the one edge that goes into the game plan that you never know on 4th and 1, helps get that defensive end free that gets that stop. So Bob Shoop, a guy that's very well respected, guy that knows ball. He'll be a huge asset to that staff, especially in the game planning and practice planning area.
Hey, boy, what's kind of the outside perspective on Manny Diaz? He's running the defense right now at Miami. He spent a lot of time at Mississippi State. You cover the SEC a lot. What was kind of his reputation at Mississippi State, the defense he ran, and then, transitioning to Miami?
Yeah, well, anytime you go from Mississippi State to Miami, you probably did something right. I thought his guys always played hard. I thought his blitz packages were really good. But the thing about Manny is, he started out as a video coordinator, has worked his way all the way up to being the head coach at Miami, and that tells you he's a grinder. That tells you that he wants it more than anything. And now that he's in a spot that kind of feels like home, that feels comfortable, typically those guys blossom. Like I told you earlier, I think his game management needs to get a little bit better, and it will. That comes with experience because Manny Diaz is still young. Do not forget how young Manny Diaz really is. I think he's got a long, good career ahead of him. They need to make some waves next year, I think, to keep that momentum going into what could be a huge recruiting cycle for them, and then let the chips fall where they may.
Speaking of recruiting, like you stated, it's very vital, to bring in top recruits, have national classes within year in and year out. Miami is in a great area in South Florida for high school football recruiting. A lot of programs from out of state always come down to South Florida, bring the best of the best prospects, to their respective programs. This is a controversial question I had with former people on this show. How would you rate this staff at Miami ranking-wise compared to other programs?
If I had to rank it, obviously based on the ACC, I think, adding T-Will and T-Rob puts you in the upper echelon near the top. And I think that's been a big feather in Manny's cap. Because when you're the head coach, it's not just how much it's how well you can hire guys. I mean, there's some coaches that aren't the great head coaches that aren't the greatest X's and O's guys, but they know how to hire better than anybody, and they know who can help get their team where they need to be from a schematical standpoint. And then I think what Manny, going through the trials and tribulations that Manny has, it just does nothing but reinforce how much you need great recruiters around you that are relentless, that aren't afraid, that are able to coach, that are able to bring the guys in, that are able to win their room and do the little things that the casual fan doesn't see. You try and mix hungry guys with experienced guys. I think Manny's done that. You look at hiring Bob Sheep as an analyst and then bringing in T-Will. Those two totally opposite ends of the spectrum, but it's great to have on one staff because it gives you versatility. And I think that's the word I would describe with what Manny's done with that staff. He's made it versatile, which in the end typically helps you and helps broaden your reach.
Hey, we'll see what happens. Week 1, we got the infamous Alabama Crimson Tide.
Best of luck with that.
When we were talking off air, JBoy, you stated this is the best time to get Alabama. You have a young underclassman, Bryce Young, coming in. A lot of changes. Bill O'Brien's their OC. Sarkisian's going to be gone. I mean, what are your thoughts about this game?
Well, as early as it is, and Bama reloads now. Let's not make any mistake. They're going to have the most talented players on the field, but you have a young quarterback in his first, real big game, kind of being the guy, if it is Bryce Young, which we all think it'll be. But if I'm Manny Diaz, I'm heating him up the whole game, and we're going to see what happens. Because if Alabama's able to sit there and hold the ball and stay in the pocket and run their play action game and do all that, you're going to be in trouble. But I say that because they're replacing so much. Miami returns a decent amount. And again, if you're going to catch them, you might as well catch them game 1 with some inexperience, because by game 3 or 4, it may be too late.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. Honestly, hey, we'll see what happens. Miami doesn't do well in neutral site games against SEC opponents. We've lost the past 2, so we'll see how we do against Alabama. I just want it to be a competitive game. I don't want it to be
welcome to the team.
Yeah. Welcome to college football, game 1, and we'll see. Derek King, he should be ready to go by July, so we'll see how he'll perform. JBoy, what's the outlook for Auburn football going into 2022?
Oh, well, it's always the first year is kind of a wash. They've got a lot of holes up front they've got to fix. I think they're going to do that in the portal. I think if you lose 3 or less games, it's obviously a home run year. Wouldn't be surprised with an 8-4, maybe a 7-5, just with how good Georgia's going to be, the way Alabama reloads. Texas A&M, that's a road game next year. Yeah. And I think without Kellen Mond, they may be even better, as crazy as that sounds. So the first year, it's going to be interesting. I don't think expectations are going to be super high, but you know how it is in the SEC West, especially in a place like Auburn. They expect you to do well even when the chips are down.
No, 100%. I love that mentality as well. The pressure's always on when you got Alabama, Auburn, programs like Texas A&M on your schedule. Gotta love it, JBoy. Who's going to be under center for you guys? Because I know you've had kind of a quarterback scramble, this past season.
No pun intended. But it's going to be Bo Nix, I would bet. I think they're going to bring in a guy from the portal to give him some competition. They may be looking around the FCS ranks and stuff like that. But I think it's going to be Bo Nix. And if anybody can develop him, get him to stay in the pocket, they got to fix the O-line because it's a blend of the two is the reason why he's been struggling. But I think mixing it up under center, going in the gun, the way Mike Bobo does his play action game, being able to utilize the tight end, I think he'll have a chance next year.
Beautiful. Last question I got for you, JBoy. If Miami was in the SEC with this staff, where would you rank them between all programs?
I would say probably in the top 6. Obviously not in the top. I'd say probably 5th or 6th. I mean, the SEC, it's, you look at these staffs and it's ridiculous. I mean, Alabama's hiring NFL coaches that just got fired to coach positions. So, it's always interesting in the SEC.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I really like what Jimbo Fisher is doing at Texas A&M. I am really impressed. I love him as a coach.
Yeah, he's a guy that adjusts to his personnel. They kind of just squeezed people to death this past year with the running game. And if he gets a quarterback that can sling it around, Jimbo's going to want to throw it more. And I think A&M will become that much more dangerous. So they've got the money, the facilities, and the resources. They just finished top 5 in recruiting. And that's a pretty scary deal if you look at the trajectory of that program.
JBoy, you want to get on Canes football's good side? Just say we have a better staff than the University of Florida. Just want to let you know. Put that in there for you.
Hey, well, I mean, you guys don't throw shoes in critical moments, so I guess you guys are coached up a little bit better.
Oh man, God, I gotta love it, man. And then at the end of the year, Dan Mullen's like, I'm open to NFL head coaching vacancies. I'll take the Jets.
Yeah. Well, you see Kyle Trask and Kyle Pitts and Kadarius Toney walk out the door, and you start looking around and trying to find a nice new Corvette.
Yeah. Hey, JBoy, can you please leave a last kind of intro to your podcast, SEC Total going on, where people can find you if they're not watching it right now, and we'll watch it later on YouTube. Did we lose JBoy? I think we lost JBoy. All right. Well, that's a wrap. Jake Crane from the JBoy Show does a tremendous job. Go check him out. Is he back, JBoy? I think we lost him for good.
Hey, so can you hear me?
Oh, he's back. Yeah, Jake. Sorry about that. Just leave a quick intro for anyone watching where they can find your podcast. SEC Total, the JBoy Show. If they want to find SEC football content. And we lost him again. All right, guys. Hope everyone has a great rest of your night. And always, all about the U.